You've heard a lot from us about traceability, about connection to our food system, about relationships. And I think that the thing that's the most interesting about this, at a time when we are seeing that we need these global solutions that really have to have impact locally, at the local level, to ladder up, to be able to feed all of these people, that during a time when we know that climate change is really taxing our food system, that there has been one very important and very sustainable part of the conversation that has almost been eliminated. Right now, we're at a time where the conversation is a lot about plant-forward food systems, about cultivated meats, about things on land-based technology solutions. And we forget about this one big, amazing idea that Mother Earth has given us. Time for the big idea. 72% of the planet, big idea. We are a blue food system. It has sat in our DNA for thousands of years. It's who we are no matter what part of the world. More foods come from freshwaters and landlocked areas than even the ocean does. In fact, the ocean only supplies us with 2% of all of the protein that we eat today. So it means that there's not only an opportunity to grow, but there is an incredible opportunity to grow smartly. Because I want you to think about this. Right at this moment, we are changing the shape of what our potential blue food system could be and what its possibilities look like as we look down the road and around the bend. And what I would suggest to you that's very important is that we are in sort of a food shaming mode. Don't eat this, eat that. Don't do this, do that. And those stories of hope are missing. And I can promise you that this sort of concept about consumers is really dated. Because what I believe is that none of us sit here on a planet that has been overconsumed and want our success or our failure to be measured by our consumption. And what I would suggest is that when it comes to the kinds of purchases and the kinds of eating that we make, and the kinds of decisions that we make around this mostly blue planet and the opportunities around this blue food system, are really going to be triggered by the way in which we feel about how we contribute, not how we consume. And one of the things that we can do is we can make everyone, all of your readers, all of those that are buying the foods, all of those that are going to Kimball's restaurants, we can turn them from consumers to contributors when they feel that their dollars can meet their values. And guess what? Blue foods can do that. But we've been doom scrolling around the ocean for a long time. Leave it alone, it's okay, we'll figure it all out on land. We won't. And as I said yesterday, the incredible thing about this amazing blue food system is that there's hope. For all of the things that you hear about in the water, I can farm seaweed and I can help regenerate. I can put a fish in the water and farm it and use a species that's more climate change resilient, like a warm water species in the island, around the New Zealand area, in those waters that are warming, where maybe the original species won't grow. So I can do that while we figure out what the other issues are, because we have to think about feeding people. And the only way we do that is if we tell the stories of hope. No one wants to doom scroll any longer, and we know that that is very, very demoralizing, and it freezes people. Because let me tell you, if facts and figures were going to save us, they would have done it by now. It's the stories of hope. So I want to show you one, because I talked about seaweed a little while ago, and I want to show you an important one. And let me tell you, when you hear this story, you're going to be sucking down that seaweed at every meal. So imagine that now 90% of lobster fishermen in the state of Maine are growing seaweed, and one company, Atlantic Sea Farms, is guaranteeing they'll buy it all. And as the lobster fishery moves and the waters get warmer, they're going to have an economy that's going to bring resiliency to that coastal community, but keep them with their living on the water. So if I want you to eat a seaweed snack, and I'm doing it through this storytelling with them, because you could have knocked me over with a feather, imagine the opportunity and the possibilities when we do it through stories of hope. So you all have asked me a lot of questions today about blue food, and I can tell you that I know for sure that there is hope in the water. And Fed by Blue has been founded specifically to create education toolkits and K through 12 education and access and advocacy and policy and all of the things that you have been hearing about. But the reality is, it's not that good work isn't happening on the water, it's that we have a communication problem. And we have to do a better job communicating so that everyone understands their ability to be able to create and shift a market. So I sat down, and you may not have recognized his voice on the first video, but I sat down with a friend of mine by the name of Andrew Zimmern. He is a food systems thinker. We're lucky enough to have him as a UN food ambassador. Millions of followers on social media. He's the bizarre foods guy that's got the bald hair that ate all kinds of weird things all over the world on his television show. And I said, Andrew, why is it that every time I talk about aquaculture, somebody puts me into a corner and wants to kill me? And you're the greatest communicator in the world, and how are we going to get this message out? And so here's what we decided to do. We have to own mass media. It's not good enough. Like you've seen in your edible communities, we have to own the narrative. And it doesn't come easy. We've got to pitch Hollywood producers and writers and journalists on how to write about the stories that you think are so important. Just like Hollywood can get us to wear our seatbelts, or they can help to stop smoking, or even more things like social justice issues and LGBTQ plus rights. There is a shift that can happen when we start to talk about how we are going to own this narrative. And it's calculated, and it's specific, and we have to get to work right now because we don't have time. So I laid this out with another friend of mine, and I'll tell this story quickly, and then we're going to play this other little piece that I'm very proud of. But I talked to another friend of mine who had grown up in Maine. He was an avid fisherman with his dad. He went on to law school. At some point out of law school, while he was practicing law, a man by the name of Stephen Bochco asked him to write a series called LA Law. That turned into Ally McBeal, which turned into Boston Legal. Some of you are old enough to remember all of these. And for the younger folks in the audience, you will remember The Undoing and Big Little Lies with Reese Witherspoon. And what he said was, no matter how much he wrote, he always wrote to fish. And when he would go out to fish, he saw the decimation as he was fly fishing on the rivers of Idaho and all across the world, the decimation of the salmon stocks. And he believed that salmon were so important to our ecosystem and the understanding of how we're all so intricately connected that he said, as the salmon go, we go. And so he decided to put his money into aquaculture. His name is David E. Kelly. If you don't remember or you don't know who he is, you'll know Michelle Pfeiffer, his wife. And they have invested $100 million in trout farms in Idaho because he thinks steelhead trout will help shift that dependency on salmon and therefore help save the stocks. And when Andrew and David and I got together, we decided we were going to try to shift and own this narrative. Because who else could do it but a 12-time nominated James Beard Award-winning chef and a 13-time Emmy Award-winning producer that can put all the star power behind it. So with that, I will tell you that we are in the midst of filming a docu-series, and I am going to show you the first reel that came out of our filming. For all of you, take a look at what is going to be called Hope in the Water. 16 countries we're going to be filming in. We did a story call and had almost 480 stories that were submitted from everywhere, from Africa to the South Pacific, and we're going to be telling their stories, stories of hope on the water, so that then when you are supporting those blue foods, you know not only how important they are, but that you have hope for what our food system can look like in the future. And how this connects with you is that when this series premieres next fall, I'll be calling, because we're going to have these community toolkits, and we're going to want chefs to be cooking responsible blue foods with screenings and premieres in all of your communities through our streaming entity and through Fed by Blue. You've listened to me a lot over the course of the last couple days, but I promise you that when we look at this, when we change the shape of how our farmer looks, when we think about how we're utilizing this in this mostly blue planet and how we can support a regenerative and contributive food system, I think you'll leave here knowing that really that power is in our hands and that hope really is in the water.